Mark Zuckerberg is spending $600 billion by 2028 on AI infrastructure, one that's the size of Manhattan. So it's the beginning of a whole new era of reaching customers, and nobody knows how to do it right. And we're all still reeling from the fact that the pandemic sent a lot of us home and in a new way of working. There are a lot of people that are very resistant to use new technology. And then once they start using it, it's like magic to them. But the thing about these AI models that's a little bit frustrating is that most people don't know how to use them. And they don't realize all the power that they have in these models. I was not leading through fear. I was not saying like, hey, you're fired if you don't use AI. I was leading through love, saying I really deeply care about you as people, and I want you to be relevant for the future.
Welcome back to the Revenue Dilemma podcast. This show is about unlocking growth and challenging the status quo to uncover the real strategies and tactics that shape company transformations and breakthroughs. Today's episode zooms out to the biggest shift of our time, how AI, love, and leadership will reshape the future of business and humanity. My guest today is Brett Hurt. He's a serial entrepreneur, investor, and author. He's co-founded and led companies like Coremetrics, Bazaarvoice, and data.world, and taken a company public and sold another to ServiceNow. He's also invested in more than 100 startups. In addition to that, he's the author of The Entrepreneur's Essentials and The Lattice, and is now leading a new movement he calls Love Conquers Fear. Brett and I go way back to the early Bazaarvoice days, to walks and conversations that shaped my own career. My favorite part of this episode is when he shares the story about how his leadership style crystallized into something very different from the fear-based avatars we see everywhere today. He's choosing to lead entirely through love. It's Brett at his most authentic self, and it says everything about how he's thinking about the future. In this episode, we'll dive into why AI adoption is lagging inside the enterprise and what's really holding it back, how the 30-30-30 rule and change dynamic shows up in every transformation effort, why Brett believes we're on the verge of the greatest margin and revenue expansion in S&P 500 history, and his vision for abundance for all, and why the next age of leadership must be rooted in love, not fear. By the end, you'll not only see where the future is headed, you'll walk away with a playbook for leading with clarity, courage, and compassion in the midst of massive change. So let's jump in. Here's my conversation with Brett Hurt.
Preparing for this conversation, one, it gave me an opportunity to just sit back and reflect, throughout many, many years of our lives kind of intertwined together around the tech scene in Austin, in particular, obviously joining you in the early days of Bazaarvoice. But the amount of writing that you've done online, the number of companies you've invested in and are sort of angel investing and advising, boards that you sit on. I mean, just the wealth of knowledge, pattern recognition, information. I was like, how are we going to how do I get through as much of that as we can get through in an hour? No idea how we're going to do that.
Yeah.
But I guess given all that, and just given what we're trying to unpack here with the revenue dilemma, I'm just curious, like as you take a step back and sit back and reflect in this moment, kind of post data.world, transitioning into ServiceNow, what do you think is the number one barrier to growth right now happening in the enterprise that everyone is feeling, but maybe nobody is talking about? What do you think that is?
I think the biggest, I was actually just on the phone with the CEO of a company that I've been involved with. And he was just in Bentonville, Arkansas, and Walmart was asking him about what the next 10 years are going to be like. And I'm like, wow, by 2035, I just wrote a science fiction novella called The Lattice that goes from 2031 to 2080. And it's like super hard to imagine by 2035. So the answer I gave him is I said, hey, you need to think about a world where there are no web browsers, where everything is done by AI agents acting on behalf of you as an entity. And it's the new SEO race. The fact that Google became so dominant in search that they essentially owned what's called search engine optimization. Those are the free results in Google that you don't have to pay for, right? I mean, Google is just a money printing machine. Meta made $45 billion in cash last quarter. Mark Zuckerberg is spending $600 billion by 2028 on AI infrastructure, one that's the size of Manhattan. So it's the beginning of a whole new era of reaching customers, and nobody knows how to do it right. And we're all still reeling from the fact that the pandemic sent a lot of us home and in a new way of working. I think your company actually is pretty virtual. And data.world went pretty virtual. I tried to get everybody back in the office, but I never wanted to mandate it. And frankly, that's happened across lots of companies. So it's always starts with how do you reach the customer? And it's gotten very, very hard to reach customers, and it's going to be even harder with AI agents. So we've kind of got to re-architect the way that we get to customers. And the advice I was giving him to give Walmart is to make sure that they're spending a ton of time with Anthropic, which makes Claude, one of the frontier models, with OpenAI, which makes ChatGPT, with Perplexity, which makes one called Sonar. That's their large language model. They're also a meta model that sits on top of many others, and they're reinventing shopping because the companies that worked with Google early on to really dial in SEO and not make it spammy were the ones that ultimately ended up winning. And it's something that not a lot of people are talking about because it's a shocking number of people that have never tried ChatGPT other than one time that are in the C-suite at many of these companies.
Wow. Have you seen any statistics on that? I actually have not seen any statistics.
Yeah. I mean, there's been 700 million people that have ever tried ChatGPT. Yeah. About 10% of them use it daily. And of course, there's 8.2 billion people in the world. And so it's a very exciting time if you're one of these frontier models, because we've never seen revenue growth like these companies have. OpenAI launched ChatGPT on November 30th of 2022. I think by the time we're recording this, it's probably about 1,022 days since the launch of ChatGPT today, which means we haven't even hit the 3-year mark, but yet OpenAI has 13 billion of ARR. And they hit 10 billion of ARR about 2.5 years after the launch of ChatGPT. Now, they're a 10-year-old company, to be fair. So they spent a lot of time in development initially as a nonprofit. But it took Salesforce.com 18 years to hit 10 billion of ARR. And it took ServiceNow, the company that just bought my former company that I started with great co-founders, data.world, it took them 21 years to hit 10 billion of ARR. So it's taken OpenAI 10 years. Anthropic has grown from 900 million of ARR to over 5 billion in the last 10 months. So we've never seen anything like this in human history, where AI frontier models and this race for AGI is being so prioritized. And there's part of that that's happening because of fear, this existential fear of if China gets AGI before us, it's all over for the US. If we get AGI before China, it's all over for China. It's such a ridiculous notion. But that's the mindset that we've been locked into, the scarcity, zero-sum mindset. And, it's going to affect everything. I mean, commerce, the consumer represents over 60% of the US economy. And it's going to dramatically affect the way we shop, because if I can shop in a way where I just tell an agent what I need, for example, let's say I'm booking a fairly complex hiking trip and I need, the flights taken care of and all the hotels I'm going to stay at along the way and the supplies I need to make sure I don't run out of, food, at a critical point in the hike. It'd be so nice to just tell an AI agent to just do all of that for me and handle all the complexity. And we're almost there right now. If you haven't tried the Comet web browser from Perplexity, you can just pull up a website and then click AI Assistant on the side and just tell it what you want it to do on any website you want, whether it's Gmail. You can say, hey, go through all my emails and tell me all the things I should unsubscribe to, or whether it's American Airlines, where you say, I'm trying to book this pretty complex routing and just go figure it out, or Kayak or anything. I mean, I'm already doing that all the time. And so it really is the end of the web browser and the beginning of, I don't even know what you call it, kind of the AI agent revolution. And so everybody's kind of unnerved about it, but they're not really re-architecting for it right now the way that they should be.
Yeah, so that's you're essentially saying that's the conversation that needs to be had, is customer acquisition and reaching your customers in this new age.
Yep.
And then you sort of mentioned that the adoption of ChatGPT and other Gen AI tools is actually quite low. Sounds
it's
like
very nascent right now.
So what's the barrier to that barrier? Why do you think that's the case? Given just given all that adoption that we already just talked about, but why in that particular subset of the enterprise is it not being as adopted as seriously?
Yeah, so this has been the bane of my career as an entrepreneur, right? Because as you know, by background, I've been programming since I was 7 years old. So I've been programming since 1979. And always what's been obvious to me that will inevitably happen with technology, it's not obvious to most people, and things always happen slower than I want them to happen. And the crazy thing about that is, right now what you and I are doing are just talking. Everybody knows how to talk. And that's all you need to know how to do to use ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Like you can literally just speak to it.
Yeah.
In any language, by the way. I mean, like when I was in Japan recently, I asked it to go summarize the reviews written by native language Japanese speakers of 10 restaurants we were considering, because I'm a vegetarian and I wanted to know like what the locals thought about these restaurants, and then tell me in English which ones I should go to and why. Well, think about all the things that had to work for just that. It's like the Babelfish future, right? And actually now the new AirPods are coming out, which are like the Babelfish. They translate in, I think, 5 different languages dynamically. And so you have something that all you need to know how to do is just talk to, but it is hard for people to change. Do you remember when we were growing up, there was that book called Who Moved My Cheese?
Yeah.
Do you remember that? It's like, it was something on the New York Times bestseller list for months and months. I mean, it was crazy. And it's such a ridiculously simple book about, a mouse like trying to find cheese, and, and one is highly adaptable, and that's the one that gets the cheese. And the reality is that there are a lot of people that are very resistant to use new technology. And then once they start using it, it's like magic to them. But the thing about these AI models that's a little bit frustrating is that most people don't know how to use them, and they don't realize all the power that they have in these models. You can use them like, if you're traveling, just being in an esoteric, Zen Buddhist temple in Japan or wherever you're going, you can just snap the artwork and ask it for the entire history. And it's way better than a travel agent at telling you that, or a local guide, because it'll give you everything you want to know. And then you can just talk with it about asking it different questions about that piece of artwork. And with companies, there's 2 things that have been holding them back. One is resistance to change. Part of that is fear. We don't want to lose our jobs. And that's just ridiculous, because ultimately what's going to happen is there's going to be billions of new personalized products and services created because of the fact that the barrier to creativity is being shattered. But people tend to be fearful, and they tend to be very fearful if they work at large companies, because large companies are more about protecting lots of things that came before them. Like they don't realize the brave entrepreneur like Sam Walton that started Walmart in the first place and put that DNA of the obsession of the customer into the company. They just see a big machine now that has many, many billions of revenue and, over 1 million employees. That's what Walmart has today. And ultimately, it's all about protecting like that brand and the experience and everything else. And so, there tends to be a lot of resistance to change in a big fortress like that, a business that's grown to that type of magnitude. And then the second thing is the very real fear of, what if it just gets access to all of my data and it knows all my business and it tells all my competitors all the data? And so using them the right way with the right governance, et cetera, those were a lot of the things we helped instigate at data.world, because the reality is that these models are trained with all the public content available, from the ancient spiritual text to anything you can imagine that's publicly available, including all the videos, a lot of books. I mean, Anthropic just settled a $1.5 billion lawsuit on that front. But the majority of data inside companies is hidden from these models. I mean, sure, they have the technical documentation that is out there in the public eye, and I mean, it's amazing for technical documentation to talk with these things and learn about anything you want in terms of how to integrate this and that component. But they're really scared of using these in the wrong way. And they're also hesitant because if they're using it for something mission critical, the hallucination is something that stops them in their tracks a little bit. But the reality is, in the core metrics days, going back to a business that I started back when I was 26 years old, the majority of the use cases people were using core metrics for with their e-commerce sites, it was a web analytics company, was to be directionally pretty certain whether an ad or a merchandising initiative or a website redesign, et cetera, were working. And we were over 90% accurate. That's good enough. It's not a transactional system. It wasn't like they were using it to do their accounting. So the fact that it was over 90% accurate was really great. And these models are getting more and more accurate by the day. Perplexity actually is one of the most accurate right now because it does a meta-analysis across the models where it fact checks and annotates everything. And so, they just need to get with it really quickly. And I would actually pose that we have the biggest margin expansion in S&P 500 history over the next 5 years, which is incredible. Because if you're a big company, if you can get like an extra 1 percentage point margin, that's like a great day at the office. That's a great year at the office. Everybody's getting big bonuses for that. Like for businesses like, you and I have started, that's like, not that big of a deal, but it's a really big deal and a big system. And we're in a period where we've got the greatest margin expansion opportunity over the next 5 years for the S&P 500, combined with the greatest revenue expansion opportunity too, for them to test out like all different types of new market segments. And so, there's going to be many disruptors that really become AI native from the beginning. And we're going to see just an absolute explosion in personalized products and services.
Yeah, this is super interesting because you're hitting on a couple of dynamics. So one, the insight that you brought up around the self-preservation kind of protection of the status quo, or what has been built in enterprise, as something that's holding back adoption, I think is super interesting, because even you saw in the MIT Media Lab study where apparently they found that 95% of Gen AI pilots aren't producing any measurable outcomes for the enterprise. And if you saw that study that came,
I did. Yeah, it's been very debunked, but
it has. Okay, because that wasn't actually one of the areas that they called out. They called out things around misaligned incentives and learning and some flawed integration, but that psychology there actually wasn't called out there. So
I mean, the beginning, I guarantee you there was a study like that at the beginning of e-commerce for all the early pioneers. I guarantee you there was a study like that at the beginning of mobile. Like everybody thought everything mobile sucked. I mean, and they're right. Like it really did suck at that point in time. Like it was a most horrible experience on these mobile phones at that point. But the ones that really stuck with it, I'll tell you a funny story, true story from the gosh, was it Core Metrics or Bizarre Voice days? I think it was from the Core Metrics days. So I was with this gentleman who used to be the CMO of Target. Okay. And they were destined to be an early pioneer for e-commerce. But they were so early that the CMO, in a presentation to the CEO at the executive team meeting, showed it connecting via dial-up modem. And it was such a bad experience getting it to work, that the CEO said, I never, ever want to see anybody present this stupid thing. Nobody's going to shop that way. Give this all to Amazon or somebody that knows what the hell they're doing, because this is not the future. And that was why Target partnered up with Amazon, much to their chagrin later on, because they could have been an early pioneer. So, so sometimes being very early in a very structured environment where it's all about protecting the brand can really, really hurt you if the CEO does not have an adaptable mindset. Like if they're more of a mindset of don't move my cheese, right? We invoke that book. If they're like, hey, this is a money printing machine and don't screw with it. But we're in the biggest technological shift in human history right now.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So to your point there, as I've had many conversations recently with a number of CTOs who we know commonly here in town, as I've been building my team, interestingly, I've asked them, like, how's the adoption of tools to help the team with coding and improve productivity and so on. And across the board, the answer I'm getting is about 30% of the team is adopting it and all in. 30% of the team thinks this is a conspiracy theory and like doesn't want to give any data away, and like a bit of what you just said.
Right.
And 30% of the team just hopes that they can keep their head in the sand. It's all going to go away and they don't actually have to change. Right. So I think that's pretty common, and maybe that's the dynamic, and maybe it's a 30-30-30. If I actually think back to revenue initiatives I've tried to deploy, or new tools or new processes we try to get in place, it usually distributes that way. But so going back to what you just said about the adaptability and the adaptable mindset of the CEO, what have you done in the past, pick any company or situation, to break free of that 30-30-30, or to break free of that mindset so that the company can move forward and take hold of this? What have you done to break through?
Well, we actually faced this, believe it or not, at data.world, which is really surprising because, we were about 120 people when ServiceNow closed on the acquisition. That closed on 7/7. And, I'm not at ServiceNow, to be clear. Like I'm, running Love Conquers Fear, and we can talk about that. But I'm meant to be an entrepreneur, and I think they're a great, great company. $10 billion cash on the balance sheet, one of the best companies to work for. And up until OpenAI, they were the second fastest company to ever hit 10 billion of AR. So it's a great, great outcome for the people and everything else. But I, in my core, am an entrepreneur. And at data.world, we saw this huge margin expansion opportunity, which would make our company much more resilient. And one of the things that we decided to do is put Brandon Godochi in charge of AI operations. And he became our VP of AI operations. And the reason we chose Brandon for that is that he's incredibly malleable. He actually is the only guy I personally know who, he actually started out a long time ago as one of my financial advisors. So he was working for a big, company, Merrill Lynch. And he ultimately decided to quit doing that, learn how to code, go back to his design roots, because he had been to design school for undergrad, and make a go at starting his own companies. And unfortunately, those didn't work out. But I was like, Brandon, just come work for me. This is the beginning of data.world. Because you're so adaptable and you have such an amazing attitude that, don't worry, it'll all work out, and you'll get to learn from people that actually have been starting companies for a long time. And so he came on board and he played lots of different roles in the company, and he ultimately was up for something new. And I was like, oh my gosh, well, Brandon would be amazing at this. And there's a book called The Goal that I was exposed to. It's by this gentleman, his last name is Goldratt, in business school at Wharton, where it's all about supply chain. Well, it's all about a factory optimization, and it's something about finding the Herbies. I can tell the whole story, but it's basically finding where the bottlenecks are in the flow. And you can apply it to any process. So we had Brandon go department by department at data.world, and any bottlenecks we just automated out with AI. And ultimately, we lifted our gross margins dramatically over a 2-year period as a result. And actually, while our revenues grew a lot, we had some attrition, and we ultimately didn't backfill a lot of positions. We became a much bigger revenue company with the same amount or lower people. But the people individually were getting to exert much more creativity. So that's the good news side of the story. The tough part was constantly, as the CEO, begging people to use AI to make their work more efficient. And I said, look, I would plead with them. I would say, I am honestly not doing a good job for you as a CEO if I do not press you to use these things, because you are going to be obsolete if you don't. Like, this is the next big shift, and I want you to be world class. I want you guys to be the most sought after talent. And ultimately that resulted in ServiceNow, buying the company in part, and they've got a killer AI team as a result. But we started out with a lot of internal, like, hey, I'm doing it this way, and this is the way I've been doing it. And they weren't defensive. It's just, even though we're a young company, they weren't very malleable, some of them. And then once the shift started to happen, the delight started to come in, and oh my gosh, I do see how much easier this is making my job. And the margin lift started to occur. The barrier to creativity was being shattered. So they were able to exert more creativity at work. One of the old sales plays that I think I told you about at Bizarre Voice, it was either me or Michael Osborne that told you about it, but this one for sure came from me. Because I was wired this way since the beginning of Bizarre Voice, and you were amazing there. I mean, we could talk about that, but you were incredible at Bizarre Voice. You were just unbelievably great. Was to do real research on the prospect, like really understand their business, like really understand what their job is, think about their pain, and I would encourage the sales team to go read the SEC reports. Like, they have public disclosures of all the things that they're doing strategically. I mean, it's really crazy how much public disclosure you have as a public company. Go and see what they post on LinkedIn. Go and see, if they've written any blog posts. Go and see if they've given any talks, et cetera. Well, that would have taken, 3 to 4 hours to really do right. You know how long that takes now? We built a tool for that, about 5 to 10 minutes. Yeah. And it's way more comprehensive.
Yeah.
And you can even role play with it. So we built, 21 distinct AI applications with just automated separate things. But the reason I bring that one up for this podcast in particular is the hardest job, I think, in an entire company is selling, because you're on the front line facing rejection and just trying to get through. And most people just want to hang up as fast as possible when you call. Like, they've never heard of you. If you're calling and you had the moniker of I'm Tony Capasso and I work at Google, everybody's going to give you a salute. But, I'm Tony Capasso and I'm working at this stealth startup, et cetera. They're going to be like, why am I on this call? Please give me back my time. I just want to go on a coffee break or whatever. Right. So they're trying to say no as fast as possible, and you're trying to break through. But if you can show up to that meeting with something that only took 5 to 10 minutes to produce, and you can make it highly personalized, guess what happens? You're going to get an evocative emotion from the other side. Because I am a CEO. I've been a CEO since I was 24 years old. I'm 53 now. And I cannot even tell you the number of sales emails I have gotten since the launch of ChatGPT on November 30th of 2022, where they don't even type the name data.world correctly.
Yeah.
They do a capital data space world. I'm like, you did not even go to our website.
Yeah.
And by the way, with AI, and I don't say this to them because it would be mean, but I just delete, I'm just like, and that is over 99% of the outreach I get is that bad. There's nothing. And I'm like, my book's online. I've got, all types of content online. I'd be the most easy guy to understand from online. And they don't do anything to personalize it. And I'm like, wow, even in the AI age, you're not doing anything to personalize it.
Yes. Well, so, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, you take that opportunity to just connect with that person on the other end. by letting them know and understand that you know something about them, or you've tried to put the work in to get to know them a little bit and what they might care about, even just to validate whether you're on the right track or not on the right track. At least it makes them part of that conversation. Well, and it sounds like at data.world, I remember hearing from Ryan Cush and others that we know in common how excited they were about the work that Brandon was doing. Because he would come back with insights, or he would come back with something that was built that was a breakthrough of sorts, maybe even a small one, but it's still something new that people couldn't do before. And so it makes me think of, we were talking about these barriers to growth. We're talking about barriers to adoption, which ultimately gets us to growth into the right conversation. And now you're talking about, well, what if we take somebody who's got the interest and inclination to go try and test and go figure things out for us? So you're,
and by the way, every company has people like that.
Yeah, exactly. So you're identifying those people. Now, what you have talked a little about in this conversation so far is mandate versus not mandate. So what I hear is with AI, you were trying to create a pull effect around this in a sense where you could show enough of what's possible that people could get excited about it, right?
Yeah, I was not leading through fear. I was not saying like, hey, you're fired if you don't use AI. I was leading through love, saying, I really deeply care about you as people, and I want you to be relevant for the future.
Yeah.
So this is a shift that, trust me, I've been in tech for a long time, is so profound that you must get with it just to be relevant. Like I want you all to have phenomenal careers, both at data.world and post data.world. So I was leading through love. I, for better or worse, and I think it's for better, I choose to lead through love. Like I've been a CEO for a long time, and I was trying to figure out my style when I first became a CEO, and easiest way to get that title is to give yourself that title, so your own company. I didn't know what the heck I was doing, when I first started. So I was just reading tons and tons of management books, just trying to stay above water. And I ultimately decided that my style would be love, because I think love opens and fear contracts. And I wanted people to be very transparent with me. And it's very hard as a CEO to get to ground truth. The bigger the company, the harder it is to get to ground truth. I go on hikes every now and then with our mutual friend, Adam Zeppelin, and he tells me stuff that happened in the Bizarre Voice days where I'm like, I can't believe that happened. I can't believe that happened. Like, we're 850 people. And I'm like, you have to be kidding me. That happened. And I'm like, well, why not? I know. And he was like, well, if you knew, those people would have gotten fired. I said, heck yeah, they would have gotten fired. Of course I would have fired them. That's like so bad. Like, so, there's stuff that is so hard to get to ground truth. And even leading with love, there were so many things hidden from me. But I would, all things considered, rather know everything. I don't want to be a micromanager, but rather know everything going on in a company, because that is, there's nothing more important than spending time with customers, listening to what customers need, learning from them. And the people on the front lines are the best people to learn from, because they're the ones that are facing that constant rejection, that pain of losing to a competitor, or getting hung up on. And, that product market fit and that constant iteration is so, so incredibly important.
Yeah. Well, maybe we could dive a little with that into what you're doing today, because I was, on this thread of, you're creating more of a pull effect versus a push. So you're opening people up by pulling them along with, but not dragging them, but actually inspiring them to come with. And you're saying that you're doing that through a love-based approach versus a fear-based approach as a leader, which, by the way, isn't exactly obvious. Not everyone does it that way. There are plenty of successful people who do it the other way, let's say, right?
There's a lot of big leadership avatars today who lead by fear.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's brought you to what you're working on today, and specifically this, for you to call what your work on Love Conquers Fear? And I know it has also to do with AI and the Age of Abundance for All, but how did you get here? Is it through some set of experiences here in leading these companies?
Yeah. So Love Conquers Fear is the manifestation of my entire career. I mean, starting with programming since I was age 7. So one of the things that I've been really good at, like I'm bad at many things, but I'm good at a few things, is predicting where the future is going with tech. I mean, that's been my entire career. Has been, Bizarre Voice, where, we worked together, was predicting that commerce was going to become much more social. Core Metrics was predicting that commerce was going to become much more analytical. Like I was too late, unfortunately, with that one because the .com bust wiped out. We had 100 customers, and then the .com bust happened, and we went from 100 to 3 because 97 of them went out of business. But then we went Walmart, et cetera, and eventually had a $300 million outcome. But oh my gosh, it was traumatic. Like going from 100 customers down to 3, I had to fire 2/3 of the team and rebuild from there. It was horrible. So what I see happening right now with the exponentially accelerating technologies of AI, quantum computing, robotics, and brain-to-computer interfaces is that it's never been more clear to me that we're going to be able to enter into an age of abundance for all. And by all, I do mean all. I'm including countries like Chad. Chad is $660 per person GDP. America is $85,800 per person. Okay. And that means there's real suffering in Chad. They're number 187 out of 189 on the Human Development Index. Getting clean water, getting food, getting healthcare is almost impossible there. And I know because I was picked up by an Uber driver on this way to give this talk at MIT to 50 CEOs. This is gathering they're having, where I was talking about the hard problem of consciousness in the accelerating age of AI, quantum computing, and robotics. And this guy picked me up, and he was from Chad. And I was like, wow, how cool. Like, we just had this amazing conversation. He's a delightful guy. Yeah. Like, you would have loved him, like great personality. And I'm on ChatGPT learning about Chad with this guy because honestly, I knew nothing about Chad at all. Like, I don't know if you know anything about Chad. I knew nothing about it, right? I just knew it was a country in Africa. That was it. And so I'm asking him all these questions. We're having a good conversation. He's sending almost all of his Uber money back to pay for his wife, children's expenses, his parents. They look at him as rich. He's in the land of opportunity. They're suffering in Chad. He's saving up for the next 7 years to move his family to the land of opportunity. And he's like the immigrant story. And I was like, what hope is there for Chad in this age? I was like, robots, right? You're going to have a pretty much infinite supply of cognitive labor through AI. It's going to get embodied via robots to have a near infinite supply of physical labor. You send in an army of robots, whether you're a company or NGO or what have you, or you're the government of Chad buying these things, and they go in and build all the clean water that they need. They build the solar energy projects. We're going to have unlimited energy from the sun in my lifetime. I mean, it's something like 18 seconds of the sun's energy that hits the earth. If we were able to capture all that, it would power the world for many years.
Yeah.
Just 18 seconds, right? And it's like the big light bulb, just staring at us in the sky every waking hour saying, you could just plug in. You just have to figure out how, right? And solar energy is plummeting in cost. It's amazing what's happening in solar. So that's the age that we can enter. And I'm very confident that it'll be in my lifetime where we'll get into this age. The biggest problem is not the Matrix or the Terminator scenario. The biggest problem is us. It's our mindset of zero-sum, scarcity, fear-based mindset. And it's always been with technology to use technology responsibly. Like when we discovered fire, of course, that was the original viral, marketing, where everybody's like, oh my gosh, you can cook your food. Oh my gosh, you can warm your homes. And it spread like fire, I guess. And we used it mostly for good, but it was very painful if it was used to burn people. And unfortunately, it was used to burn people. There were villages razed, et cetera. So all technology is like that. Our whole destiny as humanity is to create better, easier, more meaningful lives through technology, climb the Maslow hierarchy, if you will. But the hierarchy starts with energy, or should, like that should be before food and water. And we will, I think, develop into a world of nearly unlimited energy in our lifetime through the sun. And it's just a matter of time through material science breakthrough, because, just like AlphaFold, which is Google DeepMind's product that allowed us to solve the protein folding problem, which is going to create tons of medicines we can't even imagine today to solve all types of diseases. There will be an alpha energy for breaking through material science that allow us to really crack the code on material science to the point where we just have nearly unlimited energy from the sun. We can store it and everything else. And that's going to happen pretty quickly, I think. And that is going to lead to us being able to turn places like Chad into an oasis. But the problem is whether or not we destroy ourselves. And I think that we won't. And there's a lot of things that give me confidence in that. I'll just give you 3 examples. One is we haven't destroyed ourselves yet with nuclear weapons. Now, if I was an alien and I came to Earth and I knew nothing about humanity, I would zero in on the fact that we have a lot of nuclear weapons that have massively destructive potential. And then I would ask myself, out of all the nuclear weapons they built, just quickly inventory them, how many would it take to destroy all the major cities and send the world into a nuclear winter for a decade and kill billions of people? You know what the answer is? Take a guess.
Oh, a very small percentage.
What do you think?
5%?
It's 2%.
2%. Yeah.
We have 50 times more nuclear weapons today than would be needed to destroy the world.
Yeah.
Okay. 50x. Then if I was an alien and I assess that as the threat vector, the biggest threat vector for humanity today, I would then ask myself, well, are they still developing them? You know what the answer is? Yes. China has never built more nuclear weapons than they're building right now.
Yeah.
The US is also building a lot of nuclear weapons. Other countries, we're trying to stop Iran from getting one, et cetera. So you would assume that humanity has some type of disease. And actually the acronym for this, do you know what the acronym is? It's MAD. Okay. It's like insanity. And it stands for mutually assured destruction. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the acronym itself is like the definition of insanity. So we have to cure that disease. Okay. But anyways, we have contained it for now, right? With Hiroshima, Nagasaki, we saw the destructive capability and we're like, this must be contained. And so far humanity's contained that. If you go back in time, smallpox, we all worked together. If you go back even further, 50 to 70,000 years ago, there's a good friend of mine, Byron Reese, who told me about this. He's written some of my favorite books. He's a really good friend here in Austin. We collaborated on a lot of things together. He told me this, and I had to fact check it because most people I've talked to do not know about this. So life on Earth has been around for 4 billion years. Hominids have been around for 4 million years, and Homo sapiens for 250,000 years. So we're evolutionarily, we haven't been here that long. And if you go back 50 to 70,000 years ago, we were in an ice age, and there was a supervolcano event which literally darkened the skies, and everybody was suffering in the dark, in the freezing cold. And we were down to somewhere between 800 and several thousand Homo sapiens. That was it for the entire population. You can trace your and my genetic DNA, which, by the way, we're all 99.9% similar from a DNA perspective, regardless of race, religion, height, anything. We're 99.9% similar. So you could go back and trace all of our DNA to those people. So if our core nature was to be evil, it would already be over.
Yeah.
Now the question is, what will it take for us to allow love to conquer fear? And there's a lot of fear right now. There's fear of job displacement. There's fear of the Terminator in the Matrix scenario. You may remember that it was 4 months after the launch of ChatGPT where there was the moratorium call, shut it down, do not develop models more powerful. That was 4 months after. Okay, we're so far past that moment. That's like so yesterday. And that was just March of 2023. Okay. So we have to transcend that disease we have and get back to our core beautiful souls and the divinity that's in all of us. And, I look at that spiritually. I look at that from lots of different standpoints. But, The Pope just, I'm Jewish, as you know, but the Pope just this week gave a beautiful talk about we need to be able to look in each other's eyes and see God inside everyone, whether it's someone that is your religion or not, or your gender or not, or your race or not. That's within us all. And you can replace God with consciousness, the love of the universe, the astral plane. You could talk about it as source, and the Torah, source is a proper noun. It's a capitalized noun, the divine source. So whatever you want to look at that as, we know that it's loving. We know that's actually the nature of our reality. And to allow ourselves to transcend this mindset that is caused by us thinking that the only thing that matters in our reality is how much money you can make and what type of person you marry and, how much sex you have and just all of these things, like, the food you eat and like, the alcohol you drink and all this stuff that's all that there is. And you only live once, right? YOLO. But the reality is that we live over many lifetimes and we always are here to expand our love and expand consciousness and ultimately grow ourselves. And we're constantly having to relearn and lifetime to lifetime what makes us a better human being. And some of us, I'm sure you've met people. When I say the word old soul, I'm sure some people that you would say have old souls, and some people that have like a next level wisdom, in terms of the way they live. And so we have to constantly be striving to discover that. And the beautiful thing is that when you walk that path, you're much happier because, whether it's Christianity, the kingdom of God is found within you, or Judaism is all about tikkun olam, like let's repair the world. It's such a more fulfilling life. Happiness does not come from the house you are in or the car you drive. We all need to have basic things, but it only comes from within. And so we have to get back to that. That is the most human thing that we can do. And everything will work out when we get back to that. And I think that we're being awakened right now, and that we will get back to that. And it's going to be amazing to see. And I'm 95% certain that we make it. And then once we make it, oh my gosh, at that point, we're only bound by the laws of physics, of which we don't even really understand. We know what 4% of the universe is made of. We call the other 96% dark energy and dark matter. We have no idea what it is. It's kind of crazy to think about that we only know what 4% of the universe is made of. And we have never reconciled classical science and quantum science. And quantum computing does not work unless things like quantum entanglement are real. And Einstein was the one that mathematically worked out that quantum entanglement was real. Sadly, it wasn't proven in his lifetime. But he was convinced it was real. And then the scientific instrumentation came along that proved it was real. And so we have so much to discover. And, one of the common critiques I get, it's funny, people are like, okay, Brett, so when we reach this age of abundance for all, are you just saying we're going to be like Bhutan and we just measure ourselves on gross domestic happiness? Like, what about capitalism, et cetera? And I love capitalism, right? I'm a capitalist. And I think capitalism has lifted billions out of starvation and poverty all throughout the world. It's a beautiful human invention. And I'm like, you're just thinking too small. Like, you're just thinking earthbound. Like, yeah, there will be some people on earth that just want to live a great life and spend lots of time with friends and family and hiking and doing all these beautiful things together. And then there'll be people like me that I would love to go visit, and see what the edge of a black hole is like. I want to get sucked in, but but I like to go see a quasar, right? I'd like to go to another planet and help life start on that planet, like a barren planet that has, I'd like to see if we can break the speed of light and figure out faster and light speed travel. Like, there's so many things. There's no end to human curiosity and drive. And, we'll think of the next big things to tackle once we've turned Earth into a jewel. And that's what my science fiction novella, which will be out by the time people see this podcast, it's called The Lattice. But that's what it explores, is like how that happens and then what happens as we get there. And it gets pretty wild pretty fast in that series. But it's really beautiful and it's rooted in love. And I hope more people do what I'm doing, where they try to show the vision of what's possible. Because when you show what's possible to humanity, it gives us a destination to go to, versus thinking too limited because they saw the Matrix movie and they're like, they were going to create a Matrix, or they saw the Terminator or whatever. And these tales, by the way, are as old as time itself for humanity. Like being Jewish, there's the tale of Golem in Prague, which the rabbi animated, it turned sentient, it destroyed the synagogue. These are hundreds of years old stories. So they're grafted in our psyche that we are so afraid that like machines are going to eliminate us. And I think that's a completely ridiculous notion, because we're the ones building these machines in service to us. But we have to love humanity to direct these machines in a loving way. And some people don't love humanity. Like I had a dinner at our home recently where we were talking about, will AI ever become conscious like we are? There are a lot of range of opinions. And personally, I'm not sure. I think probably not, but I'm open to maybe it happens, and I wrote in my short story series that it starts to happen around 2060. But, regardless, like AI used as a tool could be extremely destructive if used in that way, right? The scale of these are so profound. But one of the people around the dinner, he said something that really hurt my heart. Like I really felt it in my heart. He said something like, well, I've seen what a great job humanity has done. And I felt this pain. I was like, wow, like inside, I was like, you have lost your love for humanity. Like you've given up on us. And we can't give up on humanity. Like humanity has done so much beautiful good for the world. Yes, we do have a disease, like, with nuclear weapons, et cetera. But our ability to transform is really amazing. There are things that we look back on 100, 200, 300 years ago and can't even imagine that we did those things. And so, don't give up on humanity. Don't give up on the fact that we ultimately can transform to become, just the most amazing creatures, not just for Earth, but for the universe. Because once we solve our problems on Earth, and the only way we solve them is if love conquers fear, with technologies these powerful, at that point in time, we propagate the universe. That would just be an amazing future. And that's the Star Trek future, essentially.
Yeah.
That's how it plays out. And I think it plays out in this lifetime. I really do.
So, and super interesting. So I mean, for you with Love Conquers Fear, what role in the 95.5, like making sure the 95% likelihood that we get to their side, what role do you see yourself playing with whatever you create next? And we've talked maybe a few months ago around, maybe it's some companies, maybe it's you helping to get them started, or maybe it's others. Obviously there's writing involved and there's other things, but what role do you want to play in that, you personally, and with what you're building?
Yeah.
How do you see that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm still on the same plan, and I think I'll be on this plan for the next 10 years of my life. So first of all, like Love Conquers Fear is a podcast that's launching on September 24th. So by the time this airs, people will see that. I've already recorded 10 episodes, and it's going to be on a release schedule of every Tuesday and Thursday. Although it launches on a Wednesday, September 24th, because the Tuesday of that week is Rosh Hashanah. And I'm like, I'm going to be at the synagogue, and I probably should honor the holiday, right? I mean, it's a big holiday. So that release schedule for next week is Wednesday and Thursday. I'm writing a book called Love Conquers Fear, which has the subtitle Humanity, AI, and the Age of Abundance for All. And I'm tackling some really big challenges in that book. I start out with the definitions, what I mean by fear, what I mean by abundance for all. I then talk about application in the later chapters, like how do you apply that to climate change, nuclear weapons and warfare, education, healthcare, a bunch of other really big problems that we have to solve. And then I end the book with transformation. What does humanity actually need to do to transform into that age? And how do we do it? Like very practically, what does the geopolitics, et cetera, look like in that age? And so it's very ambitious. I am already investing around the thesis of how to make the age of abundance go much faster and much smoother. So I just made a major commitment to a climate tech fund in this area, and I think it's an amazing time for climate tech with all the material science breakthroughs we're going to have. And I invested in 3 or 4 additional companies just in the past couple of months that are in this area, not climate, but in other areas related to this thesis. And then my plan is that these vessels, the book, the podcast, will hopefully inspire a lot of people to join companies or be a part of this movement. But it'll also be a vessel for me to explore what is my highest utility as a capitalist, to figure out like where do I want to plant my flag to personally like make it go faster with less risk. And I don't know what the answers to those are, but I love the fact that I'm on that journey, because every time in my life where I've had a thesis about how the world was going to change, first of all, it was right. And second of all, I didn't know what I was ultimately going to do. Like, I did think that the world was going to get much more social, and then Bizarre Voice manifested. And it was great. The timing was perfect for that. We went from zero to over $1 billion IPO in 6.5 years. So everything just lined up, because when we launched that company, it was 2 years before the iPhone came out. Facebook was closed to public. There was no Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, et cetera. All this tsunami of social was coming that we could ride that wave. And you hope to be that lucky, right? Entrepreneurship is always grit and luck. So I'll be a vessel for whatever is next with capitalism. And the reason why I choose capitalism is that I don't know a better organizing function for humanity than the magic of things like stock options. If you want to work with the best people in the world, capitalism is a good way to do it, because everybody does need their needs taken care of. Now, what that looks like once we hit complete abundance, I don't know, but it's going to take a while to get there. And so for the next 10 years, I'll be endeavoring to do everything I can to make sure we get there. And the way I look at it is, and I want to be clear, like I don't view myself as like a world savior. Like, this is not a savior complex. Like I think there's a lot of people on a parallel journey to me right now, and I'm following them and watching what they do and learning from them. And it's people like Eric Schmidt, who co-wrote Genesis with Henry Kissinger and Craig Mundy. It was actually Henry Kissinger's dying work. His swan song to humanity. It was a prayer that we would make it in this age that I'm talking about. But Eric Schmidt's, from what I can tell, is putting everything on the line to make sure we make it. Dimas Hassibis, who was the founder of DeepMind, who now is in charge of everything AI at Google, is really, really cares. Mustafa Suleyman, who's in charge of everything AI at Microsoft, he was the co-founder of DeepMind. It's interesting. The co-founders of DeepMind are in charge of everything AI at Google and everything AI at Microsoft. Amazing. Google just hit a $3 trillion market cap this week. And then, there's people like Dr. Fifi Lee out of Stanford. She wrote a great book. She's a immigrant success story, came from China. She's really putting it all in the field. Mira Murati, who is the CTO of OpenAI, she's putting it all in the field. Reid Hoffman is putting all in the field. So a lot of people are on parallel journeys to help humanity make it. And they know the stakes. Like, trust me, they know the stakes. I've been in rooms where I know that they know the stakes. And it's really up to us, Team Humanity, all the way. And it's going to be intense. Like I'm not under any illusion that this is all love and rainbows. Like, there's going to be some really bad stuff that happens with AI. A terrorist will use it to do some really bad things. But if most of humanity is wired for good, that means there will be many counter attacks and the ability to really understand how they're going to use it. And I believe that we're mostly good. I believe we're mostly here to manifest love. And sometimes, it takes a lot of suffering in our lifetime to realize that, and for us to break out of our own self-created matrix. Because really the matrix that's been created is one of our own design, from social media to the regular media, which are optimized algorithmically to really hijack our amygdala and keep us locked in a state of fear because they want us clicking so they can sell more ads. And it's not the free press's fault in terms of the writers that are writing mini stories that are about all types of technological breakthroughs, et cetera. It's the algorithms which are seeking for a goal, and the goal they're seeking is to keep us engaged. And a lot of times that means to keep us enraged or in a fear state, because that's the way our amygdala works. And we have to break out of those things. And there are many technologies coming. There's a board of directors I'm on that specifically is helping us break out of that. That I can talk about in the future, and I think it's going to be one of the greatest companies ever created. So there's many things coming. There's a lot of light coming, and there is a consciousness awakening underway because of how high the stakes are. And I think that the consciousness awakening is happening both for spiritual reasons, and it's happening because we have a survival instinct and we need to survive, or we're going to extinguish ourselves. And I'm pretty positive that we will. 95% is about as positive as you could get. By the way, a lot of people, when you really press them on this, they're kind of like 50-50, which is a little bit concerning, because you and I both have kids. I mean, I want a better world for them.
Yeah.
I love humanity. I love all of humanity. Doesn't mean I love all of the things humanity is doing at any one point, or every single person, what they're doing. Like, they are very real terrorists and things like that in the world. But the sad thing is that the reason they're like that is mostly because of the programming they've received since they were born. So we've got to break out of all that.
Yeah. And maybe that's been kind of the theme of most of our conversation, has been, to get to growth, to get to abundance, to get to this future, it is breaking free of what's holding us back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing to think about, is how to maybe break free from those shackles.
Yeah.
The fear and
the matrix is us.
Yeah.
We are the matrix.
Yeah.
We have created our own hell by algorithmic manipulation. And we've seen that. Like in this country, we have a loneliness and a depression epidemic, although we are more connected than we've ever been. Well, what's going on? Like, why is that the case? And it's obvious. It's obvious that social media and the media is hijacking us in that way. And we have to rise up and say, look, we're not going to take that. Like, we're not going to allow ourselves to be manipulated in that way, and create new things that are the next generation platforms for connection and all the things that we love. Like, Tristan Harris in the movie The Social Dilemma talked about it as both a utopia and a dystopia at the same time. And he now is on a new bent. He's a friend of mine. He gave a great TED Talk this year, which is live. He's on a new bent to make sure this doesn't happen with AI. And I largely agree with the bent he's on. And, it's the same old thing. We have to use the technology for good versus ill.
Yeah, 100%. Well, we're coming up on time here that we have in the studio, but I want to share something with you that I hope I've said before, but I can't tell you how grateful I am, one, to call you a friend, and to be a part of this journey with you in some small way along the way, and I definitely want to figure out how I can participate in some of what you're doing and join the movement.
Thank you.
But also, I owe my entire, what I've built in Austin in terms of a life over the last, let's call it at this point, 25, 26 years, to one moment with you, and really to you, and one moment in your office. I don't know if you remember this. Maybe I've shared the story with you, but I think we can maybe wrap on. So I want to share the story and then ask you a question around it. So,
sure.
So this is, we're talking about October 2007. I'm transitioning out of being an executive director for a nonprofit that was a large youth sports organization. And part of that, right, I was coaching women's soccer at UT for 5.5 years. And I had one of my former players that worked at this company called Bizarre Voice, which was really Amber Quist.
Yep.
And so I called Amber and I said, "Hey, Amber, I'm calling to make you some money. Call me back." And she thought I was trying to call her to get her to come coach one of the teams in this nonprofit and pay her to do so. I said, no. You guys have this employee referral bonus at Bizarre Voice, don't you?
That's funny.
And she's like, yeah. I said, well, I need you to get me introduced into the company because I was thinking about what I was going to do next with my career. And I wanted to be in Austin long term. And it was clear to me that being in the tech community in Austin would be a gift that would just keep on giving. And it's turned out to be that, right? The network you could build, the people you could work with, and the way the game is coming to us in Austin, let's say, right? Capital's coming in, innovation, people, right? Talent. But anyway, so sure enough, she makes an introduction into the company, and I fumbled my way through the early kind of interview process, and then did the famous test, of which I got like a maybe out of the test, which is usually a no. Like normally you don't make it past. It's a hell yes or a no, right? And so my last interview was with you, and I sat in your office right across from you, about this far away, and it was that office in the building of Mopac. And you looked at my resume and you said, "Tony, never at my last 5 companies would I have hired somebody like you," just basically looking at your resume and seeing what you've done. He goes, but you said there's something about you and your background and your leadership potential, something I see. And so I'm going to give you an opportunity to come into this company and be a part of this, but you're going to start at this pay and this status. And you got 6 months basically to prove it and figure it out. And now at this point, the rest is history for me, because I obviously had a great run at the company and it launched everything else in my career. So one, thank you for that one moment for taking that bet. But what I want to ask is, and sort of unpack as we just sort of wrap up this conversation, is Bizarre Voice was famous for this, right? Famous for taking people that were non-traditional, non-obvious, right? Talents from other kinds of roles, an engineer coming into sales, of which, pick a Brian Cush or a Chad Bacchius or someone coming from some other industry or me as a soccer coach. And over time, I've just seen you do this over and over again. So I know your passion has been to create jobs for people, help create prosperity, create abundance. But the countless number of careers that you've launched and non-obvious. So how do you do that? And maybe for those that are listening, obviously everyone understands how important having great talent in your company is. How have you found that and how have you created that, what I just described, and just found these people and turned them into what they've become?
The person that I look up to the most is Warren Buffett. And Warren Buffett famously bought Sam Taylor's company, Oriental Trading. And rest in peace, Sam. He was an amazing guy. Passed away from brain cancer, but just a delightful human being. He was one of the first people on Undercover Boss, as the CEO of Oriental Trading, this retail catalog company that sells all types of tchotchkes for Halloween and all types of, fun things for parties. And Sam was suffering under private equity ownership. And he was like, I need a way out of this. Like, they owned Oriental Trading, but it was just only about the numbers for them. There was no humanity in the ownership there. And he called Warren Buffett to see if Warren Buffett would buy his company. And he met with Warren Buffett, and Warren Buffett decided in about an hour that he would. Now, how does that happen? Like, first of all, Warren Buffett had a lifetime of preparation of learning financial statements, et cetera. I mean, he could just rip through that. It was a character test. So he's looking at Sam and saying, is this someone that I can really trust? And that, to me, matters more than anything. Like, when I die, I want to know as I'm passing that I lived a life of integrity and that I worked with people that have a lot of integrity. And you exuded that. And I was like, this guy has done one of the hardest jobs that's possible on earth. He was a nonprofit CEO. Like, the only benefit you get from donating is a karmic one. I do a lot of philanthropy, but there is no promise of any economic return. There's no economic return. It's just karma. And to get people to give you money for just karma is very hard. It's much easier to get people to give you money for a capitalistic return. Just in this world of form, we're very wired that way because we need to provide, and money is our currency for experiences and the sustenance that we need through food, et cetera. And so I saw that in you, and I've been able to see that in people repeatedly. Where does that come from? That really comes from my mom and my dad. My mom was all love, and all the love I have in my heart comes from her. It's why I dedicated my last book, The Entrepreneur's Essentials, to her. I also dedicated it to Deborah because I've been married 29 years and we've been going out for 31. And so literally it's kind of like the two women that raised me, because I was pretty rough around the edges when Deborah and I first started going out. We have a lot of laughs about that. And then the second thing is being able to think differently. My favorite ad campaign of all time was the Think Different campaign. Here's to the crazy ones ad that Apple put out. The second favorite was 1984, which also Apple put out, which is amazing. If people haven't seen either one of these ads, they should look at them. The best advertising of all time. And, thinking differently is one where, everybody's going to look at a resume and say, well, have they sold in e-commerce tools, et cetera, in the Bazaar Voice days? So to be able to think differently and about the full texture of the person and how much drive they really have, and how much are they going to be able to sit across from a prospect and really express joy and love and connection, all the reasons that actually get you to buy. I mean, you've got to have a good solution too. That goes without saying. But outside of that, if two solutions are roughly the same, you're going to buy from the person you like better. And so being able to see that in people is something that comes from my childhood, because that started with my mom seeing that in me and saying, wow, I've got this strange son who, when I was 4, I was trying to take apart Pong and put it back together. And she was like, that's strange. And then bought me my first computer when I was 7 and learned how to program with me. And then let me do that over 40 hours a week, my entire childhood, which was an interesting way to grow up. It's like the opposite of balance, right? It's like, think about the mania of parenting. There was a moment in time where I was like, my child has to learn Mandarin or they're not going to be prepared for the future, et cetera. My mom was just like, he's doing what he's meant to do. Just leave him alone. He's found his passion. And that takes a real superhuman type of strength. And so I try to look for that spark in everybody and bring out that spark too and manifest love. And that takes, some art and some skill, but that comes from the fact that I had a very loving upbringing.
Yeah, I think this is a great way to sort of end this podcast, because I think you talked about leading with love and how important that is. But part of doing that is the ability to see people. Like you can only do that if you can see somebody.
Mm-hmm.
You just said earlier in the conversation, I think it was the Pope's speech. About we have to see in other people's eyes. So
to see God in each other.
See God in each other.
Which, think about if the Pope had said that 1,000 years ago, that would have been heretical, right? To say it was all about if you don't worship Jesus, you're going to go to hell, et cetera. For the Pope to have this unifying message is so beautiful and really shows you the age that we're entering into. And I think he is an avatar for that age, which is great. And I'm hearing more and more clergy of all religions start to talk this way about the beauty in all of us as human beings, which I think is great. We need much more of that.
Yeah. Well, what I love about it is you're living it and embodying it, and you're being all of it in the way you operate in the world. So I really very much appreciate that about you.
Thank you.
You're leading with love. You're seeing people, and you're seeing that divinity in people. And I appreciate you for whatever you saw in me, because I would not be sitting in the seat. I promise you, had that.
Well, I mean,
that conversation gone a different way.
You are giving me too much credit. I want to make that
No,
clear.
I'm not understanding it at all. No.
No.
It's overstating it at all.
No. You really are giving me too much credit because yes, I was the guy that could say yes or no.
Yeah.
But you were the guy that had become the person you were. And then you were the person that once hired had that drive and you became one of the best. I mean, so it was interesting because the people that became the best salespeople at Bizarre Voice largely had a very different type of background. They weren't people that had stamped it out at like IBM e-commerce shop or something. They were very unusual types of people, but they all were extraordinary individuals. And one thing I just want to say to the listeners is that, you can just go to the entrepreneursessentials.com and the whole book is available online for free. And you can also chat with the book there. So chapter 11 is on how to hire. But basically it's the essential lessons that I've learned in terms of both building companies and backing companies. And I'm proud to be an investor in your company.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, I'm sad that we didn't get to dig into the Entrepreneurs Essentials more in this conversation, but maybe we'll have to come back and do a little redo live and go into some of those topics.
It'll be fun.
But I really appreciate you doing this.
Yep.
And I'll look forward to seeing the movement in action.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll talk soon.
Join the Revenue Dilemma conversation. Hit subscribe, share, and like everywhere you listen. It's time we solve the revenue dilemma once and for all.